Imagine a red apple. Does it have stripes or spots? Is it shiny or marked with bruises? Can you rotate it in your imagination? Try to picture what the apple might look like if you took a bite out of it. Can you see it? Most people fall within a range of visualization ability, from seeing gray, faded mental images in a single dimension to some so vivid that they are able to superimpose them in their vision. But some people cannot see anything in their mind. They have mind blindness. Also known as aphantasia, this condition affects about 2% of the population, and it prevents affected individuals from seeing pictures in their imaginations. People with aphantasia instead rely on verbal and factual cues to imagine and remember. You can test your own visualization ability quite easily using the Vividness of Visual Imagery questionnaire. The test provides 4 scenarios and asks you to rank the vividness of your imagery on a scale of 1 to 5. The scenarios include faces of loved ones, familiar landscapes, or shop that you frequent. At the end, you get a ranking of your ability. When I answered the first question, prompting you to think of a relative or of a friend, I thought of my brother. With my eyes closed, I tried to picture his dark hair and brown eyes. I could imagine his slightly crooked nose from being broken one too many times and his handlebar mustache that he's been working to grow out. But no matter how hard I focused, no image came to my mind. I clicked through each prompt, and each I answered with, no image at all, you only know that you were thinking of the object. At the end, my results read, you're probably aphantasic. But I was not surprised. I cannot imagine the beach where I grew up surfing or a coffee shop I visit every Sunday. When I close my eyes, all I see is muddy brown. Even though I've never been able to imagine these things, it was not until my last year in college that I realized this was not a universal human experience. And when I did realize what I was missing, I began to wonder how I could improve my skills. The first method I came across in my search to improve my visual skills is called image streaming, where you describe out loud what you observe in your mind's eye. For people with aphantasia, you can initiate a quasi-visual experience by gently rubbing your eyelids and describing the shapes of the blobs that appear. I aim to practice daily now. I rub my eyes gently until some shapes appear, and I tell my iPhone's recorder what images I see. Most of the time, I struggle to see anything, and I have to keep rubbing my eyes to reinitiate the formation of the shapes. I sometimes feel like my efforts are pretty futile, but the prospect of acquiring any visualization ability is so attractive that the ridiculous feeling about talking aloud about shapes that look like butterflies and sheep is worthwhile. Interestingly, many people, including myself, who experience aphantasia, are still able to see in their dreams. Understanding this dynamic is tricky because while I'm fairly certain that I see my dreams, I cannot recall the images when I'm awake. However, studies have shown that dream recall is enhanced when you write down your dreams, so I've begun to write them down in the hopes that recalling an experience where my mind's eye is open will allow me to see with it while I'm awake. This dynamic is consistent with a study that was published in 2020, which explains that there was a significant association between voluntary and involuntary forms of mental imagery, which explains why some people are able to see in their sleep despite being unable to do so when they're awake. This is one theory on mind blindness where affected people create these images in their subconscious, but they're unable to access them in their conscious minds. This brings me a lot of hope because theoretically, with enough practice, I could bring the subconscious image that I'm creating to my mind's eye. It has been about 3 weeks since I've begun these techniques. I can't say that I have developed any visual imagery skills, but I would compare the feeling that I've developed when I'm trying to visualize to what it feels like to have a word at the tip of your tongue. I feel like the image is there, just waiting for me to access it. I'm very hopeful that with persistent practice, I will reach these images eventually. When I spoke to my roommate about my experience with aphantasia, her first questions regarded how I learn. When she recalls information, she pairs it with the visual imagery. For example, when she spells a word, she imagines seeing it in her mind's eye and then reads the word that she has visualized. When I spell a tricky word like rendezvous or pterodactyl, I rely on factual recall alone. Aphantasia makes my learning different, but not necessarily worse. Throughout my going on 4 years at the University of California, Los Angeles, I found that I rely very heavily on visual learning tactics, like charts and tables or organizing my notes with color. I've also found the most success in my math and science classes, which isn't surprising given that 2/3 of an aphantasia study in 2015 reported that they compensated their lack of visualization skills with verbal, logic, and math skills. At UCLA, one of my favorite subjects has been chemistry. I think it's fascinating, but when I took organic chemistry, I struggled. and more than just the typical agony that the subject inflicts on many students. One of the main topics of the classes were organic reactions. To fully grasp any particular organic reaction, you need to imagine a molecule in 3D. Imagine water, or H2O, as two small spheres that are hydrogen connected to a central sphere, oxygen, by sticks. In order to really understand organic reactions, you must be able to turn over and move the molecule around in your head. You then need to imagine another molecule, say carbon dioxide with essential carbon connected to two oxygens, attacking the water. You must picture where on the water molecule the attack happens and what the resulting molecules look like. This is difficult for any student, but for someone like myself with aphantasia, it feels nearly impossible. The recommended method of studying for this class was to make flashcards of the reactions and imagine them occurring, but it didn't work for me. At the time that I took the class, I hadn't yet realized the difference in my visualization skills with my peers, and I could not figure out why the tried and true flashcard method didn't work for me. In order to understand each reaction, I found that I had to draw every reaction mechanism. In my present and my future classes, with my newfound knowledge of aphantasia, I am more empowered to pursue these unique methods of learning that suit my individual style. While some students with aphantasia struggle with forms of learning like auditory or written, they often excel with other forms. Whether this dynamic is different from a student who has strong writing skills but struggles with their math raises the question of whether aphantasia is a disability or normal part of human variation. In short, it's both. Having aphantasia can make learning without visual cues difficult, and it can make remembering images impossible. However, aphantasia is a normal variation in the way people think, not much different than being right or left-handed. Aphantasia is a fascinating form of human variation and a prime example of the range of neurodiverse minds. Even though I do hope to learn visualization skills, it's not an impediment and it does not need a cure. Discovering my aphantasia has liberated me from many frustrations and has offered me joy in the uniqueness of my human experience, as well as comfort in the community that I have found myself in.